All right. Hello, friends, and welcome back to Eat, Read, Sleep, where we get together as a community to vibe with books. My name is Kalina, and this week on our podcast, we have a special treat for you guys. This week's book is Don't Believe Everything You Think, Why Your Thinking is the Beginning and End of Suffering. And we have the absolute humble pleasure of introducing you to the author himself. Joseph Nguyen is a coach. He's currently has the #1 bestseller book on consciousness and thought philosophy on Amazon, and is definitely an author that you should all have your radar on if you don't already.
That's right, guys. Hey, guys, I'm Tapas, and please help me in welcoming Joseph Nguyen to our Eat, Read, Sleep community. Joseph, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Yeah, thank you both so much. I'm so excited to be here, and I just really enjoy being just with you both, and just your energy is very infectious, so I love it.
Oh, thank you. Well, Joseph, I know you're not a huge fan of talking about yourself. I know in other interviews you have mentioned that, it's very intentional that you don't have your photo in your book. But I was hoping that you can indulge us a little bit, not to create an image for our audience or anything, but really just to help us connect with you. As this is the first time we're meeting and talking face to face, we really would just like to get to know you as a person more than about your book. So is there anything that you feel comfortable sharing with us so that we can get to know a little bit more about you?
Yeah. So, it's always so funny being asked to introduce myself and about my story. I'll preface it with, I don't mind saying, about the story, because I do know that it creates more of a connection, because then you understand the place that I'm coming from. But I do want to, I guess, create the notion around whenever I do share my story, it's more, I don't want things to become, especially for people who listen or people who read books, sometimes, I got into the trap of idolizing authors or influencers, speakers, leaders, spiritual masters, and just thinking that they are gods almost, and that I'm trying to be like them. But when I got into that trap, it made me constantly think like I'm not good enough until I get to their level. So I don't want that to happen for whoever listens to my story, because I am, a lot of people say this, but like I'm just a regular person, and we're all connected to the same source. So we technically are all the same. So it's not even saying I'm like one of you or anything. We are one, and there's really no separation at the end of the day when we get deep enough. And so whenever I say the story, it's more about helping you connect with yourself more. And I'm more of a mirror for you to see more of yourself in a different light that you might not have before. So I really want to bring all the emphasis back whenever I share my story back to you or whoever is listening. And if something resonates with you, it's not because you think that I've done something great or amazing or whatever it is. It's more about you feeling within yourself a truth that you already know deep down inside. And so pay attention to that part of you and bring all of that focus back into you versus what's out there. And from that, you feel a lot more empowered versus, oh, I wish I could be like that. Or if only I were in that position, then everything would be. No, like bring it all back within yourself and sense that what he's talking about, what he's sharing, I have within me. I can feel that. I can sense it. That's why I'm even feeling this emotion in the first place. And I mean, it's kind of like science too of mirroring, right? Like we have these mirror neurons that fire within our brains whenever we see something out there and we replicate it within ourselves. It's almost in the same phenomenon of when we hear someone else's story. It's not because they're so great, but it's because we feel the same thing that they're feeling. And so we are connected with them. We are one with them. And so that's where I want the focus to be.
I love
what
that.
A great opener. I would say that tells a little bit about myself, but in terms of, I guess, like my story, let me know in what specific you want to know about me, so that I can shine some more light on it versus me staying very broad and general about myself.
Is there anything that you would like to share that you have yet to share? Maybe something that readers may not know about you.
I like that question, because then it makes me receive something different versus just telling the same old story over and over again. What hits me now to share would be, I really live my life now just so differently than the way I did before. And I truly never thought that it was possible to experience peace the majority of my day. I thought it was only reserved for spiritual masters or someone who just lives in the middle of the mountains with no external stimuli ever coming into their awareness. So for me to even be able to have peace for even like a slightly extended amount of time, like say a few hours, that's just like completely mind-blowing to me that that's possible. And I was probably one of the biggest skeptics prior to that, because it was just like impossible. It was like, how can you possibly like silence your thinking? How can you possibly go about your day and not feel stressed? Like, how could you possibly live your life without trying to predict what's going to happen or plan just meticulously every single thing that you're trying to do? So because of that tendency that I had, I was very, very anxious all of the time. I pretty much developed like some sort of chronic anxiety. I don't really know what to label it, but waking up immediately anxious, just constantly thinking about what's going to happen. I ran a business prior, and I still do, but it was a marketing agency. And so that caused so much stress because I was thinking about all these different clients, all these people, all of these things. And it was just mind blowing to me that that could be stopped one day, or that I had that same capacity to be able to do that. And I also thought I would never be an author, really. And I thought that it would be reserved for when I was maybe 40 or 50 years old, like maybe about to retire at 60s, something like that, and then share whatever wisdom that I had at that time. And hopefully people would be able to benefit from it. And so that's probably one of the biggest limiting beliefs that I've kind of let go of, which is just another form of thinking, where I seriously have zero credentials. I didn't graduate from college. I don't have any background in psychology or spirituality or anything like that other than growing up Catholic. I just run a business, no formal training of anything of any sort. And here we are with the book selling like crazy and just being able to meet amazing people like you. I never thought that that would be possible. And so that's really a byproduct and outcome of me letting go of my thinking. And just trusting that if I follow the love and intuition, everything kind of works out, even though it's really scary because it's the unknown, obviously, because without thinking, we're completely in the unknown, which is where the present moment is. And so that's where I try to live my life daily now. And because of that, I kind of do something different every day. It's not really like a super set schedule of like extreme discipline and regimen. Another thing that I bring up is like, I don't always meditate every day, which is like, you know, what kind of spiritually inclined person says that they don't meditate daily? Like, you know, if I was thinking, I'd be very scared to say that or admit it. But because I'm not really thinking, I don't really care. And
I love that.
What's more important to me is not necessarily that I have 10 minutes of peace in the morning when I meditate, but that I have peace every moment when I'm here now. And so that's why I don't necessarily meditate every day in the morning, because every single moment that I'm here, I'm technically meditating, or I'm in that meditative state. And that's what I call the state of non-thinking. And so every single moment of my life really is a practice of that. And if I feel some sort of psychological or emotional suffering, which I do frequently because I'm human, I use that moment to go within and to feel it, and to realize that I'm only feeling this because I'm thinking, and that thinking is the root cause of all suffering. And I choose in that moment to let it go and come back into the present moment. That is my practice, so that I do pretty much whenever I feel anything, negative at least, or like some sort of suffering. And that's how I live it. And so I don't really always meditate, or I don't always do yoga, or whatever it is that people do. But more importantly is just understanding where the root cause of suffering is and to come back into that moment. And so we always have that peace available. And that's really how I live my daily life. So I wake up and just like, I feel like writing. And so I write a little bit, and that's why I make my Instagram posts. I wake up and just type away, and whatever pops up, pops up. And most of the time I don't remember what is said. And that's how I really know that I'm receiving something greater than my own thinking, because the mind can only think of the past and the future and referencing that only. So your experiences, and it can't think of anything greater than that. And an object emotion will stay in motion unless acted upon by an external force. So like our thinking will keep thinking like that. Can't think of anything new. Our mind seriously can't think of anything new. It's impossible. But intuition and receiving something greater from the universe or God, that is when new thoughts come in. And we really can't control that, but we can allow ourselves to receive it much more often, when we're willing. So that is a little bit about me. Let me know if there's if there's another specific question you want me to get at, because I shared it a little bit.
Love that. Joseph, so Tapas and I have read your book forward, backward, inside out. We've had debates and battles about it, and I've listened to some of your interviews, but hearing you speak to us, I'm just getting goosebumps right now. I'm feeling it, because I think that I'm also letting go of what I was planning to ask you, what I'm talking about. And I'm just in the moment and listening to you, and I feel something that I don't usually feel. I don't know what this is. It's pretty exciting. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing you talked about a little bit about is, how you don't meditate as much anymore. And, Kelly and I have both had some life changes recently. We're doing this full time now. But I would tell her, before in my previous life, I would always be journaling every single morning because I'm letting out my frustrations and all that kind of suffering that I was going through. But now I don't need to journal as much because I'm kind of living out my purpose, and I'm living just having thoughts and not thinking. So I love you that you kind of explained that, because that's, as you were saying, I was like, yes, that's exactly why I'm not doing it anymore. I was trying to put it into words. So why? Because she'd ask, why don't you journal? I'm like, I don't feel like I need to anymore. I'm doing what I love to do, and that's perfect.
That's spending time with me every day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But that's absolutely beautiful, and that's exactly right. It's and the way that I viewed meditation prior was almost like a means to an end. I was only meditating so that I can experience peace. That in and of itself is a vicious cycle that caused me to suffer even more, because when I'm meditating, I'm like, okay, I just want to experience this peace. I want to just visualize. I want to manifest whatever, and then when I'm done, then I immediately lose that feeling because I was so attached to getting something out of it. And so I actually viewed meditation as almost like a necessary evil. And it was like a chore that I had to do so that I can get what I actually wanted. Because of that, the actual act of meditation became very gruesome, tiring, and unenjoyable. And so that's not how we should really do anything.
Absolutely.
And so when I let go of all of that, I realized if I wanted to meditate, I wanted to meditate because I wanted to meditate, not because I wanted to get something from that. It's kind of like love. I'm not dating my fiance because I want to get something from her, right? Because I want to get her money or whatever it is, because she's beautiful, whatever it is, receiving something from her only. I love her because I love her. And that's what unconditional love actually is. It's doing it for no other reason than because we love it. And that's how I approach every single act that I do now is, am I doing this so that I can try to get something out of it? Or am I actually doing it because I genuinely love it and I don't really care about the outcomes? And that's when infinite possibilities of what could come in open up, because we're not so fixated on this is the only thing I want to get from it. And then, of course, we suffer in the present because we're trying to get to some future that really never comes. But that's a little bit of a tangent on why I approach it in that way, and probably what you're feeling too, Tapas.
Yes, definitely. And then, at EWC, we're huge on purpose as well and personal mission. So do you have a purpose or a personal mission that you follow that kind of guided you to becoming an author, writing this amazing book?
Purpose is very interesting. I don't think about it too often anymore. If it does come up as a thought, then I'll have it, but I don't necessarily linger on it as much. I used to, and paradoxically, that caused me quite a bit of suffering because my purpose.
Yeah.
And you might actually experience it. This is very interesting. So, I guess I'll tell the story about growing up. I always wanted to do good in the world. I always wanted to make an impact and be able to influence other people. And I always had good intentions in that way. But for some reason, the more I cared about that, the more I personally suffered. And it was for a multitude of reasons. Everything that I did, I tried to make sure that I impacted somebody, that they got something, that I changed them. And how often are we able to affect change in other people? Yeah. Very rarely. Yeah. And that made me so incredibly frustrated, even though I had really good intentions. So I always grew up with a lot of anxiety, a lot of angst, a lot of frustration, mostly because I would sit there and listen to other people rant or about whatever that they were going through in life. And at the end, I'm like, okay, cool. How do you feel? Nothing changed. And I'm like, that's terrible. Great. I wasted my time. So like that became a vicious cycle of, why am I feeling so bad and suffering so much when all I want to do is just be able to impact other people and give? So all of my focus was external. And I even had this big purpose of like trying to increase the consciousness of the world and like impact 1 billion people, whatever it was. And I started to think about it. I was like, that's kind of ridiculous. like I know that I will never reach that goal. And by me constantly trying to fixate on that, that made me suffer in the present, even though I was making progress towards it because I cared so much about the end goal. And then I was trying to think of all the ways that I could get there faster. And so my obsession became, how do I optimize this? How do I impact more people? What can I do now to like get me there quicker? And that made me suffer quite a bit. And that took me away from my purpose, if you want to call it, of actually being able to bring more love and joy into the world. And it wasn't until I actually started to let go of that I began to fall into just this deep well and abundance of love that was already here. And as a byproduct of that, me living in that space, in that love, in the unknown, essentially, I inevitably started impacting other people, which was so weird. And I actually began to impact more people when I let go of that, because I wasn't worried about what everyone else was doing, what everyone else was thinking, whether they were impacted or not. And now I get like the best of both worlds, where I can be very, very happy, full of peace, love, and joy, and other people are impacted, but I'm not doing it for that purpose. So I guess like a twofold answer to your question is that about my purpose, the story of it. But then now I would say, I guess in the way that you would describe purpose, you might also use the word truth. And if that were me and I were saying, what is my own truth now? And what am I living in? And how am I living in my truth? To swap the words, I would say that my truth is really to be able to help people see the illusion of thinking, and to help people alleviate their own suffering. I guess like really my whole thing is to help people see their own divinity, their own truth, and to look within for that. And the way that I do that is by going deeper within mine, instead of trying to help people see it. Like I'm not trying to force people to do it, right? So like all the focus comes back to me. It's weird because a lot of times people think purpose is like, it has to be very altruistic and about other people. Mm-hmm. But I think we can fall into a trap with that and constantly chase something, when if we just come back to our own truth and our own, I would say, inner purpose, if you want to call it that, that's when we are the most empowered, when we feel the most peace, love, and joy, when we feel, and when we are impacting the most people in our lives. It's just by being us and to live in that truth that we know unapologetically, no matter what's happening around us. But that's kind of my purpose, if you will.
I'm mind blown right now.
Yeah, I know. Like that actually makes a lot of sense.
That you're saying.
Because there's been times when we talked about our purpose, and her and I would go back and forth a lot, and we would kind of get into like arguments. And she's like, "I'm like this, this is that, and so I can see where we're going to suffering mode, because now we're just arguing on something,
trying to put the right words on paper, and it doesn't feel right.
Right.
And so like every couple of weeks we sit down, we're like, this doesn't feel right. This isn't what we're trying to do. And we're just like going back and forth on it. And it doesn't make sense because, a lot of times it's more of, like you're saying, it's more of that feeling, it's being in the moment, and it shouldn't be a goal or something that you turn to guide you.
Right.
Yeah. It's kind of like that unapologetic expression of love. Like, everything is almost a byproduct. Like everything that happens externally is literally a byproduct of who we are being in the moment. Yeah. And so the more that we can be that, the more that we can feel that, the more that we can allow this abundance of love that is all around us, all within us, to come out and to express itself in whichever way, form that it feels like, that is the greatest thing that we could possibly do. Your way might be speaking or podcasting, and that's absolutely beautiful, is like sharing your own truth to help other people find theirs. Something along those lines is what I feel is more of like a more accurate purpose, so to speak, because it's coming from you, and the sole purpose is to share that, and not necessarily be on, we're trying to help people change themselves, or like, you know, like if they don't want to change, that's perfectly fine too. But if they do want to change, perfect. And we're here to help. And so it's kind of like in that light of like bringing it all back within us and finding that source of truth. And we're all connected anyway. And so it's like, if we bring everything back to within us, whatever we do for ourselves, we do for other people. But other people think it's the opposite way. And they're like, oh, what you do for other people, you really do for yourself. I don't.
Yeah.
Yes, but like you got to put on your own oxygen mask first. And if you don't do that, you can't help other people. Yes. So that's really how I look at it, is what you do for yourself, you do for other people. That's my golden rule, which is kind of flipped, I guess the inverse of what we've been conditioned to believe.
Yeah. It reminds me of the story in your book when you're talking about your now fiance, McKenna. Congratulations. Yes. I think in the book she was your girlfriend, right?
Yes. Yeah. So throughout the time we actually got engaged.
How you said that she couldn't put into words why she loved you, and every time you asked her, she just said, I don't know. Right. And I feel like that's a lot of times I feel that way about certain things, but I feel like I'm expected an answer. So I try to make up something and I say something, but it's not, it doesn't make sense. It's not right. So yeah.
Yep. That's what you're experiencing is because love isn't logical.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can't put a reason behind it. Otherwise it's not unconditional love. It's conditional love.
Yes.
Right.
It means I love her, or I love doing this because I get something out of it. That's not love. Yeah. Love is abundant and always ever giving, and it's an infinite source and flow of it. So we don't need to get something in return to give it. But it's funny because when you do just come from that place, you receive so much from it. But it's like everyone kind of has it backwards. But I always love bringing it back to what it actually is, which is you don't have to have a reason. If you love doing it, you don't have to explain yourself. And what I say too in the book is the truth needs no justification. Love is truth. Truth is love. They're synonymous. And so that, you know, we don't have to, and we always feel bad, right? Because we grew up and, you know, people always ask why, like, why did you do this? And it's like, we always have to have some reason that we're doing something. Otherwise people think that we're wafting through life, or we're not living in our purpose, or whatever it is. But that's not true. And I'm kind of working to break that mold, because if everyone just did what they loved and there's really no reason for it, that's the best expression of their own truth that it can be. And living in that place is so beautiful, because you're not chasing anything. You're not doing it for any other reason.
Absolutely. So Joseph, one of the reasons that we are covering your book was because the universe actually brought this book to me when I needed it the most. I recently opened up about my years of depression on our show. We just released an episode and we talked through why we both left a really high-paying corporate job to take care of ourselves and our family. And a lot of the time I was going through a lot of depression. And during one of my episodes, I stumbled upon some passages from your book, specifically the one from Sydney Banks that I just posted this morning. Thought is not reality, yet it's through this reality that we create, through these perceptions that we create this. And then you go on to say in there that as soon as you start thinking about everything, that's when you go into that emotional roller coaster and you have this turmoil. And this very second that you can stop thinking, that's when happiness happens. And it just, I don't know why, but it just hit me the right way. And then I started to feel so much more calmness, like everything that I was going through and thinking and feeling that emotion, it kind of just melted away, and I was finding light, and I was being able to climb out of that moment. And in that moment, I shared it on Instagram, because I'm aiming to be a little more vulnerable in sharing and talking about mental health. And, I hadn't read your book at the time. So I asked the community and I said, hey, has anyone read this book? Is there anything that you guys can share? And immediately within a couple of days, we just had so many people reach out, and they're like, oh my gosh, we got this book and we couldn't put it down. Like, we read it in just one night, and it was just really cool to feel the responses. And that was when I was like, we got to bump this book up the list. Like, I need this book right now in our life. And so that's how we got to hear with you. So I just want to share that and just say thank you to you. And then after I posted that, you responded. And I was just like, the universe like really just knew what I needed in that moment, because it just made me feel so great. And I wanted to just say thank you for that, because I know you're, a busy author. You've got a lot of stuff on your plate, but the fact that you took that second out to connect, it was very meaningful.
Of course. And what happened was really just a reflection of what you were experiencing, essentially. That I would say calm and serenity that you felt is what brought it together. Otherwise, it wouldn't have. If you didn't post that, then we probably wouldn't be here right now. But it's because you allowed yourself to feel all of that all of this transpired from it, which is absolutely amazing. So that's why it's a reflection of you, really, at the end of the day. But yeah, tell me a little bit more about what you experienced. Like, as you read that, like what was going on in your mind specifically, if anything, that kind of melted it?
So nothing really, just, I have high functioning depression where, I go about my days, and on the outside, it looks as if I'm perfectly fine. But on the inside, I feel this just sense of, it's not necessarily like a sadness, it's just like an emptiness, and it's really hard for me to explain. And I've gone through it for so long that I just had assumed that this was just normal to live this way. And I never really talked about it with anyone because, you hear people complain all the time and whine and vent about stuff. So I was just like, well, everyone's feeling the same thing. And so to me, it was normal. And in that moment, I was just, if I had to put into words, I felt empty. Like I didn't know what I was doing with my life. And then the words from your pages, I don't know why. And again, I can't explain it. I just read it and it just made so much sense to me. And then in that moment, I was feeling like I'm probably thinking too much about everything that's going on in my life. I just need to let go and feel what's going on right now. And I was at the gym at the time, and I was just like, feel the gym and just, why are you here? It makes you happy to be here, and just enjoy this moment. And then everything just kind of melted away. And I just, in that moment, I told myself, stop thinking, and you can feel this way all the time. And it was just amazing.
That's absolutely wonderful. And that's how simple it
exactly.
Really
that's what was just so weird, is because to some variation or iteration, we have heard this message before, right? Like, don't think they keep suffering, right? New. But you put it in a way that just makes it so simple and easy to adopt, that for me, at least, I was just like, this is the answer to what I need, at least in that moment in time. And that was really, really helpful. So then I guess with that being said, can you help? So as a coach, Joseph, how do you explain thought versus thinking to someone that just isn't understanding it? Because I will be vulnerable and share with you, even though we have read the book like multiple times, because we're like, what? Like, do you get this?
Yeah.
Over the past couple of weeks, we've gone to sushi, to dinner, to whatever. Like, okay, we got to battle this out, because we still argue through what is thought versus what is thinking.
Yeah, it's so fun. I don't even remember how it came to me, but that distinction allowed me to essentially experience peace any moment I was aware. And because when I was writing the book, I realized that thinking was the root cause of suffering, but I was confused, and I was wondering, well, if I stop thinking, what happens?
Right.
Does all, like, what are thoughts still there? And if they are, then are they different? Like, are there different types of thoughts? Essentially, was the thought process, and I realized that there were different types of thoughts, and so that was the first epiphany, which is, are all thoughts bad? And if it's not, then which ones are? And how do I stop that? And it was in that moment that I realized that there is a difference between thoughts and thinking. The way that I explain thought is that It is, I would just say, a block of information that pops into your mind, and it formulates some sort of word that you understand. It is really the energetic mental raw material of the universe. And so it's just energy, essentially. A thought pops in and it's in your mind. We can't really control what thoughts pop into our minds at the end of the day. You just can't. You can try. And it's funny because you actually can't predict your thoughts either. You can try to, but you really don't know what's going to pop in next. And if you did, it's just thinking. So there's a big distinction between that. And so I realized that thoughts are inherently neutral. There's nothing good or bad about them. But when we start suffering is when we start to think about the thoughts. So let's say the thought now is, I am outside. That is a thought. Like that is what it is. Thinking would be, it is unbelievably hot and I'm dying. Like that is thinking onto the thought. And that's what causes our suffering. But if we were just outside, that's it. No problem. Or my mom said this to me, which is whatever it is. She made a comment about my shirt or whatever, like your shirt doesn't look that great. That's a thought, and I received that, and I can understand that. That inherently doesn't do anything. But thinking would be, oh my God, she just said something about me personally, and this is why I don't feel enough love from my mom. And I'll never be enough for my mom. Like, this is like, do you see how thinking can then cause suffering about the initial thought of just, my mom said this? So I view thoughts as neutral. They're just information. And then it's only when we start thinking and ruminating on that thought that suffering happens. And so essentially anything that happens after that initial thought is what's going to bring all of that emotional turmoil like we talked about. And I realized that the second part of that can actually be stopped because it's a manual effort that we do. I had no idea that was possible. Although we can't control thoughts, we can control whether we think about them or not. And therein lies, the power that we have to experience peace, love, and joy now versus getting swept up by overthinking. And what is overthinking? It's just thinking it's just thinking about the thoughts. And that's what causes our suffering. And what is anxiety, right? Like, how much thinking are you doing when you have anxiety?
A lot.
There's like a direct correlation between how much thinking we're doing and how much anxiety we're feeling and how much fear. Any negative emotion is directly correlated with how much thinking we're doing. What emotion do you feel when you're not thinking?
Great.
Peace,
yeah.
calm.
Yeah. Just living in the moment. Yeah. In the moment, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly it. And that's what hit me. It's that without thinking, we experience what we actually are. We experience our true essence. It's beyond words. And that's why that's why truth isn't words. What I'm saying is not truth. It's pointing to the truth. But the truth is really a feeling at the end of the day. Just like the word apple isn't actually an apple, but it points to an actual apple. So once we get past the linguistic concepts in our minds and we actually experience what it is, that's truth. That's why I always say in the book as well, the truth cannot be intellectualized. It can only be experienced. And that's an example of it, of what happens when there's no thinking going on. But let me know if that makes the distinction between thoughts versus thinking. And then there's a chart as well that kind of goes into that. But let me know if that answers.
I think one of the things that her and I argued about was like positive thinking. So I'm somebody who always kind of looks forward to something, like, if we're doing a recording or like maybe going to Legoland with my daughter, like that's so much fun. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm thinking about what we're going to do that day. So I don't know, are kind of arguing like, should I be thinking about that? Or am I kind of making myself suffer because I'm looking forward to something? Like, how would you kind of make that distinction?
I love this.
Yeah, is there positive thinking possibly?
I absolutely love this question. So like I said too, there's really nothing good or bad in this world. Even suffering itself is not good or bad. It is because of my own suffering that led me to writing this book. So when I label things, it's to make it a little bit easier to understand, but it's really not the truth. It's just to help us be able to grasp the concept. Positive thinking is almost in that same boat as well. And what I would say about that is some people feel really good when they're doing positive thinking, right? Like, for example, Tapas, you said that when looking forward to the podcast or looking forward to hanging out with your daughter, that makes you inherently happy. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. The only thing is it absolutely necessary to think positively to experience peace, love, and joy?
No. I mean, if I just wait for the day to arrive, like we go to Legoland, that in itself could just be a fun day. So, right.
And what's crazy is that if you think positively, it's almost always in the future.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing now, though?
You're robbing yourself of the current moment that you could be happy.
That's what you told me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. It's not wrong, right? But this is how you can kind of look at it. Thinking is never in the present moment. It is only ever in the past or in the future. That is what we have to remember when we're thinking. It's only when we're not thinking that we're in the present, that we're actually here now. And so this is something that I kind of thought of as well, because I was thinking, like, do I need to do all these affirmations about constantly telling myself, like, I'm good enough, I am love, I am beautiful, I am, like, nothing wrong with that, right? But I was like, is the only time I'm ever going to feel good enough is if I'm telling myself that I'm good enough? So for 99.99% of the day, am I really going to feel not enough because I'm not telling myself that? And I was like, there is no way that is the truth. Absolutely not. And it's not like, but telling yourself that you're good enough can lead you to that point, right? It's not wrong. Like, meditation isn't wrong. Any act isn't wrong. But do we need to do that to feel how we want to feel now? And so then I realized I don't want to be walking around saying to myself, I'm so grateful for this call. I'm so grateful for this food. I'm so grateful for the air I'm breathing right now. I'm so, like, just that constant chatter on the other way. I just drove myself crazy by trying to always be thinking of positive things. And that in turn made me suffer. So then I was like, what would happen if I stopped thinking? Would I still, like, what emotion do I feel when I stop thinking, essentially? And then I just realized I can feel peace, love, and joy now without thinking. And I don't need to think positive in order to feel that. So it falls under the same category as thinking. You can do it, but again, you have to remember that you're in the past or the future when you are. And do you want to miss what's in front of you right now? And do you want to keep thinking about something to feel happy?
That's true. That's very true. That's very true. Another thing that we kind of talked about was about non-thinking. So is the goal to be a complete non-thinker at all times, or vice versa? Is it that non-thinking leads to suffering, or is suffering a root cause of non-thinking? So, like, is it
an absolute?
Yeah, it's an absolute. Yeah, that's something I heard, and I kind of argue, because I know in the beginning of the book you kind of talked about how that non-thinking can lead to suffering, but then at the end, I think one of the phrases was, it's all suffering. So that's where we kind of got into a little bit of a debate as well on this.
I said you're thinking too much about it.
It sounds like it. It sounds like it.
I'm much more of the spiritual universal person, and Tap is like, I need the facts on that.
Right. Like, I'm like a very literal and like a logical person. So like that was the new concept for me that you introduced to me personally. But then as we started talking, like, okay, I'm starting to get it now, because I was so like stuck with the fact that thought is this, thinking is that. I was like, well, I'm always thinking. I'm a quiet person by nature, so I'm always in my head. I'm always thinking. And then I was like, wait, should I just turn that off? Like, what? I don't understand. Like, it's a complete different thing for me altogether. But that's so. Is that? Yeah. What do you think about the not thinking part?
What happens when you stop thinking, Tapas? Like, what is your experience of that?
Well, it's just, so far? I mean, first in my head, it's just quietness. Like, there's just nothing happening. But at the same time, I do start to notice things around me. So if I'm like when I would go on my walks, I would be listening to podcasts, but then I would turn the podcast off because I'm not thinking too much about it. And then I started to hear, like, there's a weird buzzing in the air conditioner next door. Like, what's going on with that? So, like, I would have
you start thinking about that.
Like, why that person should really get that fixed. But I just started to have more thinking coming through versus just accepting what's happening around me. That's what I noticed when I stopped thinking.
You think more.
Yeah, I learned to do that. Stop doing that.
He should be a case study for you.
Yeah, I would be a great case study for you.
So great. I love that. And so once you're kind of like not thinking, then like random things pop into your mind, right? What happens when you just let those things pop up, but you don't think about them? Like what is that like?
They kind of just slide off. Like it'll come to my mind and it'll just kind of go off. Like I'll remember an embarrassing high school story and then just, okay, that was in the past. Let's let go. Let's not ponder too much. But yeah, I mean, there are some things that end up sticking to me. I guess I need to learn to like also let that slide off too and just be present in my walk or whatever I'm doing.
Yeah. And when you're kind of going about your day and then you kind of go into that state, do you ever like take action on what pops up in your mind? And
yeah.
What is that?
I mean, the stuff that pops up is usually the negative stuff. Like you mentioned in your book, it's usually the things that I've been trying to suppress, trying to forget about. And those are the things that are kind of pop in my mind, and I'll kind of relive those moments pretty much again. So the suffering, I guess the suffering does come back.
Yeah, it comes back. And then, do you ever, I would say, like, have like other types of thoughts where it's not negative? And what are those thoughts?
Oh, I mean, those are just the fun thoughts. I mean, if I'm like, I'm wanting to be a filmmaker or like, and I love cameras and photography and videography. So when I get into that zone, I'm just in a constant state of just thought, like maybe I should do this idea, that idea. And I'm not really thinking too much about how everything's possible. Like I guess, like you said, like a lot of the positive stuff comes from the thoughts itself. Because I'm just kind of, at that moment, I'm just kind of going in the zone and in that state of flow that you mentioned in the book too.
Yeah. So then if you want to label it the positive side, that's kind of like thoughts coming in, but you're just riding the wave, so to speak, and allowing that to be. And those are like ideas and inspiration that keeps hitting you out of nowhere. Is that correct? And you're you're basically in flow and you're doing it like amazing work, or you're acting on it and things like 100%. That's essentially what happens when you let go of all thinking. Is that you let the flow of thought, universal thought, just thoughts beyond your own personal thinking to come in. Those are ideas beyond what you could possibly conceive through thinking. It's like, where do ideas come from?
From thoughts. From thoughts.
It's just like, we have no idea where it comes. It just pops in. And that's exactly it. Without thinking, more of that happens. And every good idea you've ever had in your life, probably the same way that you had to quit your corporate job and to do this, that came in the form of a thought. And it was because you were open, and without thinking, you were able to act on it. And this is what happened now.
Yeah, 100%.
And so that's essentially how we can live our lives in this state of non-thinking. Non-thinking doesn't mean no thought. I chose that word very specifically. It's non-thinking, not non-thought, which means we don't think about the thoughts that we're having in our minds, and we just allow it to be there. And we essentially, what that is intuition. That's the best word that I can describe it as. That gut feeling, that inner wisdom, that little voice in your head that always knows what you need to do, or what you really want to do, or what you truly desire in life. That's intuition. And that comes in the form of thought. That's what you want to follow when you're in a state of non-thinking. And so that's what you can get more access to as you let go of thinking and just allow that flow to happen. And sometimes it'll tell you to do this now, or to try this, or what would happen if, like, you did this thingy. It comes in those little fun, like you were describing it, Topaz, like it's always fun. It's always playful. Always. The universe is very, very playful. It's childlike in that manner. And so that's essentially what we can follow when we're in this state of non-thinking. And that's why it's always so fun, why it's so peaceful. Because we're not really thinking about, let's say how children are. They just try a bunch of things. They just act. Whatever thoughts pop in, they just do it. It's a full, unapologetic expression of themselves. And that's how adults can act as well. And it's not just crazy and frantic. It's actually absolutely beautiful. And that's when the best innovation and art comes out from us, is when we're not doing that. I'm sure since you have a more of a logical background, that when you're trying to solve a really difficult problem, that the more that you overthink about it, the worse that it gets.
Yeah.
And as soon as you stop thinking about it and you go like take a walk or whatever, that idea hits you. The solution hits you out of nowhere.
That's true.
That's intuition. That's thought. That's what happens when we stop thinking. And that's how we can it's actually very, very practical to live in a state of non-thinking, which is allowing thought to flow through us. But yeah, that's kind of the distinction. Let me know, like, what are you internalizing from
that? Makes a lot of sense, because I'm just now reflecting back on the decisions I made, or just some of the stuff that I'm proud of. And I know those were just like random thoughts that I had, like, hey, we should just do this. And then, then that kind of worked out for the better, versus some of the stuff that I kind of lingered on for too long. Eventually I'll get to a point where I'll make the decision, but I kind of suffered through that for months and weeks and weeks and weeks. So like it kind of does build up over time. And it's sometimes it's easier as just being, hey, it's a thought, let's go with it. You guys want to procrastinate or two.
Yeah,
I wait until the last minute, like to turn something out, and I procrastinate because I'm relying on my thought to come through and my instant spark of energy. So that's what it is.
I'm a huge proponent of believing that your mind and your body are connected and should be one, and your body can only be in the present moment. So if your mind is either thinking about the past or the present, it's putting your body through a stress that it shouldn't go through. It's not natural, and that's why ailments and anxiety, depression, all of that happens, because you're not in the current state of the present that you should be. Mm-hmm. So this is like all really goodness and what I try to explain to him, but you obviously did a really better job at it.
You definitely did. Appreciate that, because I was like, I'm looking at her like a blank. I'm like, I don't get what you're saying. But you made a lot of sense. I appreciate that.
Joseph, you mentioned intuition, and I did pick up on the book in the beginning and middle parts of the book. It's much more universally spiritual, and then towards the end, it gets a little bit more religious. You bring up God a little bit more broadly. Is there an underlining message or tone to this? Like, do you need to have religion at the core of it to not feel the suffering or to do the non-thinking?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was very particular about how I described that. In the book, I used multiple terms for whatever you want to call it, like a higher power, God, universe, infinite intelligence, quantum field. It's literally, there's like tons and tons of names for it. I purposely interchanged those words throughout the book for a very good reason, because I didn't want anyone becoming attached to one specific way of it. If I only use the word God, people would automatically assume that I'm religious and that I'm trying to push a specific religion. When I use the word universe, people might assume that I'm more spiritual, but then, and I use the word infinite intelligence or quantum field, people might think I'm a little bit more scientific, whatever it is. You do not have to be affiliated with any sort of religion. And what I'm talking about in the book supersedes religion. It's not better than, but it goes beyond religion. And the reason why I say that is because every religion is trying to point to the same truth at the end of the day. They're all trying to point towards helping people experience more peace, love, and joy. That's really what it is. And so what I did was I kind of removed all of the religious dogma and just kept what all of the religions were trying to say. And I tried to say it in the most simple way that I possibly could. So you don't have to believe in the traditional concept of God to experience this at all. And even the questions that I've asked you in terms of like, what emotion do you feel when you're not thinking? Mm-hmm. You don't need to believe in God to feel that. Absolutely not. And you don't have to believe in God to experience the phenomenon of thought coming into your mind out of nowhere. And so you don't necessarily need to believe that. But what it does is that when you start to question some of these things, like where does our thought come from? Who are we? What are we made of? You can kind of start to realize that there is something much bigger than our own thinking, logical minds at play here. Like, how does our body know how to regenerate every single one of its cells every month or so? How is it possible that our heart knows how to beat on its own? How all of the animals and in the ecosystem perfectly know how to harmonize with each other to be able to create, life and go through that reproductive cycle to just continually grow? How does the universe know how to align itself and work? It's like, we're not doing it. I'm not even beating my own heart. Yet something is at play here that's allowing me to do that. I don't know what it is. Well, you can call it God, you can call it whatever it is, but there's something beyond my thinking mind at the end of the day that is essentially aiding me through life. And once I realize that all of this around me doesn't require my own thinking, that I have everything here without that, what makes me think that I need to think so hard to try to make life work when it works perfectly fine without me thinking? So yeah, I don't really identify with a specific religion or anything like that. I don't think it's necessarily important to receive the benefits of this. So I don't really talk about any specific one. And actually what I realized was, like, people are like, like, how can I use this in therapy, or how can I use this in my own thing? And a lot of people started to realize that what I'm talking about isn't supposed to replace religion or to swap it with another one. It actually enhances what they're already doing. And so I've had a lot of people that are in different religions say, like, what you're saying allowed me to become closer to God or whatever religion I'm in. It allowed me to deepen my own practice in whatever I'm following. And in therapy, they can still do whatever that they're doing, but they realize that with this addition, this new lens of looking at life, they can get better results with their clients, or their clients experience something much deeper than they could have without this. So it actually complements religion. It actually complements therapy. It complements anything that you're doing in life. And it's not a replacement for one or the other. And that's kind of the way that I approach it.
Yeah,
appreciate that clarity.
Yeah. So, Joseph, I know you've probably gone through all the reviews for your book, or at least most of them. So, like, what do you think is something that people probably misunderstand the most from your book that you've seen? Like, what's the point that people maybe are not just connecting with?
That's a great question. I don't have too many negative reviews, interestingly enough. The ones that do they're pretty biased, and they're saying, like, he's too this. So I don't really take that as a constructive criticism necessarily. They might say, like, my writing was too basic or too simplistic or whatever it is. I don't find that very helpful. And it's funny because other people say the opposite, and they're like, I love it because it's so simple. And that's why I got the benefits from it. At the end of the day, I really am, I guess, like, just expressing myself through this. And then if people can identify with it or resonate with it, that's amazing. But I would say what people are missing most, if they're not getting it from the book, is that they don't really know what thinking and thought really means. They're saying, how can I just stop thinking? This is like some bogus BS, like mumbo jumbo. I wasted $10 on this thing, even though they can return it back to Amazon. Like, I don't know why they would complain. I just find that so funny. And to leave a review too, to deter other people that could possibly find peace. But I find that they don't really understand what thinking actually means. And they categorize everything in their mind as thinking, but don't make the distinction between thoughts versus thinking. If they truly understood what that meant, then I don't think that they would struggle with finding peace. I would say that's probably the biggest thing. Funnily enough, they don't really talk much about God or the universe or infinite intelligence. Like, people don't ask much about that, even though I find that to be something that could be more confusing, because even, like, how can I possibly explain what that is? And so, yeah, it's really about thoughts versus thinking, and that's where people get most caught up. And I think it's probably because they don't read the whole book, or like they don't really get it. And I also think if they do get the concept, then they don't really try to apply it. They try to keep it in their heads and try to continually conceptualize it versus practicing it. But so those people, they don't actually sit down and say, okay,
right,
is this a thought or is this thinking? And they just like, how can I possibly stop? They don't even try. That's usually the the people that don't get it, they don't really try. If they did, they'd probably experience something different. And so that's what I feel like would be the biggest.
I mean,
gap,
I think I would be guilty of that too. When I had my first read through the first 3 chapters, I was like, that was a lot to process. And then I'm like, okay, so I went back and reread it, and then I read it again, and I'm like, okay, I'm starting to get it. And then her and I started talking about it more and more, and so then it started to like help me out. But I think that if people who aren't as open-minded, they go through the first few chapters, they're like, this was what was going on here. I think you have to kind of open yourself up a little bit to the thought of it, because I was not in that mindset when I first read it. And then after I was like, oh, okay, now I'm getting it. Okay, I got it. So I was already thinking too much about it.
You're thinking way too much about it. I was like, love this book.
Yeah. I'm looking at her.
The answer.
And I'm like,
what?
Yeah, like, are you crazy? Like, what, are we reading the same book? And then we talked about it.
I will say, Joseph, I was pleasantly surprised with your humor that showed through the book. There were lots of parts that I like literally laughed out loud. And I was like, this is funny. I wanted to throw the book across the room when you mentioned that part. Yeah. It's just, I really love how your message is very simple. Like you said, you put it into the pages where it's very easy to read. You know, some of our community said they read it in one night. And then you put your own personal traits into it as well, and it allows us to kind of connect with you, even though I know that's not your intention. But it was very enjoyable to read those small little tidbits of you in there. So with that, what's next for you? Do we have another book to look forward to? What's on the horizon for you?
Oh, I have no idea. It's funny because I did have a lot of plans, and then I realized all of that was thinking, and so it made me very stressed. It was like, okay, try to increase sales here, like by 50% or whatever, and let's like try to contact more influencers and like really push this book. Or like people are telling me you need to like create a course and monetize what you're doing even more. You're missing out on like, you know, every book purchase that you don't have that you're pushing to a course is missing out on revenue. So much of that stuff was like going through my head. And I was suffering a lot because I was like, oh, I need to like rush and make a course. I need to like do something. I need to go speak or like all this stuff. And I just realized like that was so unnecessary. and it was just not needed. And when I started to let go of that, funnily enough, sales just started to skyrocket like crazy. That was when I was hovering around like maybe rank like 5,000 on Amazon on books. And as soon as I let that go and I was like, all right, let me just like do whatever I feel like. Let's just follow the love. Let's just, you know, instead of like trying to learn the TikTok algorithm and like try to analyze every single video that I'm making, looking at watch time and like seeing what I can do to like catch your attention. Like I'm a marketer by trade. And so it's very easy to get caught in that trap. It's not wrong to do that, but for me, it wasn't right at the time. And so when I just started to think way too much, that's when things were not working. Then when I let that go and I was like, let's just see what happens. Let's just make TikToks the way that I want to make them. Let's just make posts the way I want to make them. Let's just like have fun with this thing and just do it out of love versus trying to milk the market for money and try to make a living out of it. It just started to take off. And it's funny because when I wrote the book, I was like, it's really cool if I sell a couple hundred. That would be amazing. Like, that's it. And I didn't believe that I could make a full-time living off of it. Then a couple months later, I realized I could, which was very crazy because I thought I had to make a course. I thought I had to like build an agency. I thought I had to do all these different things to make a living off of it. But literally just the book sales alone, I could then live off of it. So when I let go of all of the thinking to try to like make it work or make it better, like I went from rank like 5,000 something all the way to like, I broke into the top 100 books for like a week or something like that. It was crazy. And that's what happened. And so it was crazy. So then that's kind of what I've been doing to follow my own intuition, my own love, and just to do that. And I guess like, I know I will write books in the future. It's just not time yet. And so I don't really worry about it. I have a feeling I'll write something about flow just to make it a little bit more tangible for people. I can replace the word like God with flow, which would make it a little bit more entering the more secular world that's not as spiritual, even though the book isn't too crazy spiritual, although it can be. So I was thinking about doing a book about flow specifically because it's a very spiritual state, actually. And so I think that'd be a little bit more digestible for people, especially more scientific people, which has been studied like crazy now. And apparently it's like the happiest state that we can be in. Mm-hmm. It's a state of non-thinking is just what flow is. So I think that would be a great way to enter a different market. And it's not time yet. I'm also, since I have a business background, I'm kind of like developing something to help business leaders adopt this mindset and understand non-thinking, because I mean, that would be incredibly influential and life-changing for them and the people that they lead if they're able to lead from this state of abundance, of love and peace versus stress, anxiety, future-focused all the time and just like sacrificing everything in the present. So I find that to be very enjoyable. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like the hustle culture and like trying to be productive. And if you're not productive, then you're worthless. That's like a very A-type mentality. And I grew up around that. And so that's kind of the other arena that I'm working on entering. Just from right now, I'm kind of getting called to build a course around it. I'm not like rushing or anything. A lot of people have been asking for coaching, but I've kind of put all that on a halt so that I could create more resources for people. So I'm working on like building a journal, workbook type of thing to walk people through this process. And I think that'll be a lot of fun too. And the other thing too is, since I am a coach, I am creating sort of like how I coach into like a methodology from this state of non-thinking and helping people understand it. I think that would be a great way to further bring this understanding to other people and to really empower all of like the amazing coaches and consultants out there. And so a lot of things kind of in the works. I'm not really thinking about it though, and it's just unfolding. It's just like, oh, I feel like making this today, and I'll just make it. Like a journal, I just made that thing in like a day, and then I'll come back to it. And so there's not really any rush to do anything like that, but I am having a lot of fun just seeing what comes up, seeing what intuition is saying in the moment. But all of those things would be amazing, and then I kind of just like let it happen so I don't stress about it or say like I need to get this thing out now or whatever it is. But yeah, just really enjoying what I'm doing already. Mm-hmm. And I mean, the book's only been out for like 4 or 5 months.
Yep.
So there's still a lot of runway left for it, and it's not even close to getting to mass market, and it's self-published. So everything is like just me, just manually sharing it. So there's still a lot of
I was very surprised to hear that you had written your book in just 3 months. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think like 3 or 4 months. I don't quite remember. And I think that's a testament to how much non-thinking I was doing at that time. I don't really remember. I have to go back and like try to find the timestamp from when I first started writing it. But it was really fast. I think I wrote most of it in like a month, to be honest. And then the rest was just like refining it a little bit, which wasn't really that much refining. It was just like moving. It was more of like, oh, I need to add another chapter. And then I just added a little bit. So yeah, it was really fast. And so I think I started writing in like September, October, and then like, it was done by like January, February.
Well, before we end this, we wanted to give you an opportunity, if you wanted to, just to maybe send out a message to the listeners or share something that maybe they can't get from your book.
Just try out the
very simple.
See what happens.
Point. Love it. Well,
just try it. Yeah, I would ask. Just keep this question in mind, which is, what emotion do you feel when you're not thinking?
We're going to ask you that a lot.
Well, Joseph, we really just want to thank you so much for your time, for your message that you put out into the world. You've done it in such a simple way that allows a lot of people to connect with it. So I know we ourselves are personally very grateful for you and being able to spend the evening with you today. So thank you for that. Hopefully, whatever is on the horizon, we can help support you with that, and hopefully we'll be speaking with you soon.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was such a joy to be with you both, Kalina and Tapas. So I really enjoy your presence, your energy, just the inspiration that you bring, and for the leap of faith that you guys made, and just trusting in something greater than your own rational, logical minds that probably was screaming at you to stay in your corporate job and that it's safe, to jump into podcasting and sharing your own personal journeys with the world and having people connect and resonate with that. So I really do thank you for that and appreciate it deeply that you made the leap of faith. And so it's definitely blossoming and impacting a lot of people. And more importantly is you're able to kind of grow yourselves and deepen your own experience of life through that. So definitely thank you.
For our listeners out there, we do have the links for Joseph's social and for his website where you can purchase a copy of your own book. You guys, please make sure you read this book. And if you do, if you would like to supplement with our book summary, which we have coming out this Sunday, Joseph, hopefully we do you justice. It's going to be on YouTube, and definitely it shows a side of tapas that none of our community viewers have seen yet. So look out for that, you guys.
Joseph, thank you again for joining us today. And, we definitely do tell our audience to definitely check out the book. It's an amazing book. Again, for those that read it once and don't get it or aren't open to it, definitely make sure you have an open mind, because it is a really cool concept. And I love it because I definitely, just with this conversation, I have already seen in parts of my life where I want to apply that already. So thank you again, Joseph. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. And thank you to our listeners. You guys, let's vibe with Don't Believe Everything You Think.
Yep.